Welcome. How many people are new to these classes? Hi, my name is Tendrin. I met you though.
I'm new too.
That's true. You're being precise. That's excellent. So, my name is Tendrin. I've been a nun since 2002, whatever the math is. Skip that part. I've been teaching here about 2.5 years, so relatively new to Florida. So this course, Discovering Buddhism, is a series of courses, of 13 courses, ranging in subject from the mind and to emptiness, to introduction to Tantra. This one is Refuge, which you'll hear more about. No surprises here. Everybody find the bathrooms? Everybody know where they are? We ask that this hallway be sort of a silent zone because we share this wall with another class. Anthony. So I don't know if they're here tonight. I don't know when they start back up, but on Thursday nights there's an acting class. So we can hear everything if it's in that hallway because it's right behind that door. So anyway, so we just try to practice that, and they try to help us out also, even though they have to do all sorts of practices out in the classroom. So anyway, we do our best. So this particular class will last 5 weeks, 5 sessions, so it's for the month of January. It's sort of in the middle of this particular stretch of 13 classes, so, but that doesn't really matter. But if I'm talking about things you've never heard of or whatever, just ask, and if I feel like we can't really take the time in this class because it's too big of another subject, I'll just let you know. We could discuss it outside of class or via email, or you can be patient and wait till that class comes. So that's up to you. So, all right. So what does the word refuge conjure up?
Safety.
Safety. What do you think? Does anybody think of the word refuge, or is it sort of archaic?
Tom Petty.
I think I can use that between refugee and refuge.
Right.
I think refugee, it confuses me a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But to me, refugee, but I have not looked up the word, but they're seeking refuge.
Right.
So they're seeking a safe place from, so that's a really good reminder of what refuge is about. So, because refuge sort of implies that you're not sure you're safe and that you need safety. You need some help. So on a spiritual path, might mean, has, a particular kind of meaning and context, but it's still essentially that same idea. All right, let's see if the magic works today. Those who know me know I have terrible technology karma, and I share it with my classes. So I think the actual title is Refuge in the Three Jewels. So I'm so precise. If you don't study Buddhism, you won't know the qualities of Buddha, you won't know the qualities of Dharma, and you won't know the qualities of Sangha. You won't know their qualities and their power. So basically, your refuge is kind of like blind faith. In Tibetan, it's called monta, blind faith, ignorant devotion. So this is not something the Buddha wanted us to do, was to have blind faith. He wanted us to use our own wisdom, to investigate the teachings, and practice them, and then from your experience, develop a different kind of knowledge than just the knowledge, like scriptural knowledge, like being a scholar in the teachings, but more that we want to really test out the teachings and discover for ourselves through our experience the validity of the teachings. So the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are the three jewels in Buddhist refuge. So that's why Lama Zopa Rinpoche brought these up. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is the spiritual director of all the FPMT centers, of which we're one of about 160 worldwide. His pictures to the left of the Buddha. You're right. Just yet another way I'm technology challenged. So, we can look at what we already take refuge in to get a better sense of what refuge is. So many of us, if we're, depressed or stressed or whatever, might take more refuge in sleep, if we're allowed, if our schedules permit. We also take refuge in our coffee and tea first thing in the morning. If you're like me, it's like there's almost no space between waking up and turning the kettle on for my cup of tea. A hot shower, the way we present ourselves to others, our clothes, our makeup, the way we do our hair. I work very hard on mine. So the definition includes shelter, protection, retreat, and sanctuary. This is the English definition. We looked it up in the dictionary. So during this month, it will be very useful if you just start noticing what you currently use as a source of refuge. It's like what we do when we're nervous or anxious about something or worried about something. What do we rely on to get us, to either escape from those things or to try to chill about them? Some people use TV, they use music, they use chocolate, they use, innumerable things that aren't particularly useful. Mostly we take refuge in things that don't really help in our day-to-day life. We just use them to escape or for comfort or to make up for whatever else is happening. So we want to start looking at that and seeing if there might be more effective strategies than using what we currently our go-to when things are going wrong. So, does that ring a bell?
Mm-hmm.
I've got to give up my chocolate refuge, so it's becoming clearer and clearer. So the causes of refuge, according to the Buddha's teachings, are a fear of suffering in the future and faith in the objects of refuge. So this gets to this idea that we seek refuge when we don't feel safe. In Buddhism, this brings up the concept of karma. Who wants to give me a very brief description of karma? I'll close my eyes, I won't hit. Yeah.
Well, it's just the law
So what does that mean in this context? It's in the fear of future suffering.
Meaning, don't do bad things now because they'll make you suffer later.
Yes, everybody hear that? Okay, so basically it's saying that because we're afraid of our future suffering, we want to know what we can do now to change that from happening. So if you turn to the teachings, the Buddha describes how you can create the cause for less suffering in your future and more happiness using the knowledge about the law of cause and effect, or karma. So you have to develop a certain confidence that the teachings work, that they're valid. So refuge is not something you do in the beginning, unless you're me. I took refuge 4 days after my first teaching Buddhism. That's not recommended. They recommend something you like, quite a while. But anyway, it didn't fail me, so I can't, what to do. That's just how my karma ripened. So refuge is sort of, it's more to give you the idea of what refuge means. So as you continue to investigate the teachings of the Buddha, you'll have a sense of what they mean, because it comes up a lot. It's in the prayers all the time, and it's a mental attitude we're trying to cultivate if we're practicing Buddhist, so it's useful to know what it means. Not only that, we really want to understand why the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha would be considered worthy objects of refuge. And so we need to know what those qualities are as part of our investigation to be able to begin to see if refuge is meaningful. So, questions? If you're very afraid of something, you seek protection. If you have confidence that someone has the power to protect you from what you fear, you will take refuge in him or her from deep in your heart. So, in the beginning, who do we take refuge in? Mother. Is that what I heard, or did I make that up? Okay. Our mothers, or our caregivers, our fathers too, Fathers are much more involved these days in the birth of a child. So they're often present at the birth, which certainly didn't happen in my day. Very much. I mean, even in rural places, it didn't happen very much. It was, female business. So glad that's changing. But so our mothers, because if we turn to our mother, and actually what's interesting, they think that babies can recognize their parents' voices, so they will turn their attention to familiar voices. So it's so it starts before birth, kind of cool. And they do the only thing they know what to do, how to do to get their parents' attention. When they're afraid or hungry or they have a need. And my understanding, I'm not a parent, so I don't know this, but my understanding is that often after a while, babies don't cry as often because they trust the parent to come. They'll make their need known, and then they can chill out because they trust their object of refuge. Not all babies, of course, but that they learn that this relationship is trustworthy. And that comes through experience, not just because someone tells you that. You know, don't worry, I'll be there. Well, if you say that, but don't show up for 2 hours, you know, they're not going to believe you. So in Buddhism, the refuge, like if someone actually takes a ceremony and taking refuge, that's completely relying on the 3 jewels. With your body, speech, and mind, and that's just this emphasis on, it's not just your thoughts, but it's also your actions of speech, with words, and your actions with body, that you are relying on the teachings, or the 3 jewels. So this has a lot to do with trust. It's about developing trust in the teachings. To feel like I really can quit relying on the chocolate or the television or sex or, I don't know, food of all kinds, to get that feeling of safety. I can trust, that what the Buddha's teachings have told me to do, like maybe meditate every day, try to work on, recognize what's going on in my own mind, as opposed to what's happening outside of my mind, to make sure that I'm not adding to the problems of my life, so that we can, so you want to develop a certain level of trust that that it's true. If I just do what the Buddha said, how many times have I thought that, then, things would work out a little better. So, but that really only comes from testing out the teachings. So you can read them, see if they make sense to you, but then you have to use your own reasoning to, and try it out in order to see if there's any validity to it at all. And this is how they define, technically, a Buddhist practitioner as someone who's gone for refuge. Notice it doesn't say in a ceremony. Whether you do a ceremony or not has nothing to do with whether you've taken refuge. It's whether in your heart, your mind, same word in Buddhism, that if you are going for refuge to the 3 jewels. So many people take refuge and yet don't actually rely on the this is what we do, right? So, and you don't have to go through a ceremony in order to have taken refuge, because it's an inner process. A lot of us do go through the ceremony because it's sort of like, if you want to make sure you study, you take the test at the end of the course, because you just don't want to be embarrassed on the test. So sometimes we go through ceremonies to have a witness that we've said we're going to do this, so that we can, it kind of just helps us. We're joining a community of practitioners, and it can help us feel, take more responsibility for our actions. Not a great reason, but hey, whatever works, one of the reasons I became a nun was I'm much better at group practice, so it was really wonderful living in a nun's community, and so going to class or going to prayer things or whatever we had to do, you just, on those days when you didn't want to go, everybody's still going, you just go. That, didn't take a whole lot of willpower. You just, I signed up for this deal, so, you show up. So that makes it much easier. For me, that was, for other people maybe not, but for me, that was really a helpful aspect of ordaining, so. So the key of telling us what we go for refuge is, where do we turn? What is that go-to place that we go to when things are going wrong? If you've been studying Buddhism, do you try to put into play any of the things you've already learned? Like meditating every day. What other ways do we go for refuge?
The teachings or in
Yeah,
general?
in general, whatever comes to mind.
Thinking of others.
Thinking of others. In what way is that going for refuge?
Well, for me, it takes me out of my own head, and so I don't think I'm not thinking about myself and what's going on between my two ears as well.
Okay. And I think that's true. I agree. So this is like another way, to look at what refuge in the teachings mean. So the teachings talk a lot about becoming other-centered, not being so self-focused. And by trying to do that when you're worried about something or whatever, is putting the teachings into practice. And that's how you discover whether or not it's helpful. And then you can develop some confidence. You can have that little conversation and, okay, I can keep doing what I've always done. How well has that worked for me? Or can I try this out? Or if I've tried it out several times, it's sort of like just helping you, reminding yourself that it works. So those are ways in which we can start to replace our current habits that may not be so worthwhile with habits that are more skillful and effective. So. A general understanding and trust in these teachings will not bring heartfelt refuge. In order to sincerely seek help, you need to connect these points to yourself. So this is getting at that the teachings aren't meant to be for knowledge, just for knowledge. Just so you can go to school and tick all the boxes and say, I'm a Buddhist scholar now. That serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever. So when you read Buddhist text, it's really helpful if you read it with a certain sense of, what do I think about that? Can I relate to that at all? What does it even mean? And to keep exploring with a really inquisitive mind, not just read it and go, oh, that sounds nice, or that sounds nice, or that sounds nice. That won't get you anywhere. You really have to look at it and say, what's this trying to tell me? Because all the Buddhist teachings are personal instructions. They're meant to be practiced. They're not meant to be for just knowledge's sake. And so the more you allow yourself to engage in the teachings from a different mind than the one when we read a bestseller, or a recipe, it's much more like a recipe in a cookbook. I don't cook at all. If I can avoid turning on anything that emits heat other than my kettle, I will. And, but I read recipes. I think they're interesting, but will I try them? No. Don't like to cook at all. I like to eat though. So that doesn't always go together, but too bad. But so it's sort of like that. If you read recipes with no intention of ever cooking, they're not really recipes for you. They're just, I don't know what they are. It's kind of a weird thing. Maybe I'm pretending that someday I'll cook. But
Knowledge. They're just knowledge.
they're just knowledge. I'm probably just killing time. And that's really a waste. So, don't tell my teachers. But, so this is the thing. So, if if recipes are useful, if you need to try them out. You can say, well, hey, that looks like a good recipe, but until you actually make it, you have no idea if it's a good recipe. It could be a perfectly lousy recipe. It could look good on paper and turn out to not be, that you don't like it at all. Or they left out several steps, and so you can't ever make it come together. Whatever. You can only find out by putting it to the test. Granted, eventually, if you're a good cook, it is more and more likely that you can read a recipe and know whether it'll work or not. And the same is true of the teachings. The more you put them into practice, the more you work with them, the more you can understand what it's trying to tell you. It just becomes easier over time. And of course also, it's like the onion, we're like onions, you peel each layer, and you discover, still there are a billion layers left. And you peel another little layer, and with each layer you cry. It's really fun, this self-exploration thing. But, it's, with each time you read the teachings, they're very repetitive. You can really gain something new from it because you're dealing with a new layer of your mind, so that it gets richer and richer. To me, Buddhism is a lot about not being able to hide from yourself. That from, really becoming self-observant, it's like you can't really lie to yourself anymore. You might not change. I mean, there are many things I haven't changed, but I'm not ignorant of these habits. So it gives me a lot of freedom, though, by observing, to choose what I can work on or want to work on now. What I want to put on the shelf for a little later. So and that's incredibly invaluable. Having it gives you so much choice. There are two types of Buddhist refuge. There's the causal refuge, which is relying on beings that have already, accomplished, the status as the three jewels, or the resultant refuge, which is the long-term plan, and that's developing your own Buddha potential and becoming Buddhas. But so what it is have developed, the more and more that you develop confidence in your own good qualities, then you can take refuge in yourself, your inner wisdom, your inner good qualities. And that, of course, is what we all need. We all need to be able to feel like I can handle it. And I can handle it in a way that I can maintain self-respect, be of benefit to others, not harm others. So these are all this is our good qualities. What do you need, dear? You're just did it go out? I didn't even notice. Sorry, Arlene. Turn it off before you, because then it makes all sorts of horrible noises. I feel like singing the Jeopardy song. I just spent a week with my stepmom, so we watched Jeopardy except Christmas Eve. It's said in the teachings that in the beginning the most important action is to take refuge. Oh, that's not really true. We're going to toss that slide out. It's true in the sense that once you've decided that this is your spiritual path, then going for refuge becomes important, because it's declaring a commitment to putting into practice the teachings. And so that's what helps you enter the Bodhisattva path. But obviously the first step is like to hear the teachings, to read a book on the teachings, and then to, really investigate the teachings long before you take refuge. And then you study karma, the law of cause and effect. So if you've decided that the Buddha's teachings are your refuge, and the Buddha has said that your positive actions of body, speech, and mind are what lead to happiness, your negative actions of body, speech, and mind lead to suffering, you need to know which is which. So you study, you really want to develop an understanding of what are negative actions, because that's all they mean in Buddhism. Negative actions mean actions that lead to suffering. Positive actions mean actions that lead, and they use virtue, non-virtue, just like all other religious texts. They use, the early translators use sin a lot, but this is the meaning, is that it either leads to happiness or suffering, and it's definitive that karma is certain. Positive actions always lead to positive results, but it's not instant. So we can't just see it, because we can do something incredibly negative, and the immediate experience is pleasure, like the bank robber who succeeds, and, doesn't get arrested and is thrilled with all its, earnings. According to the Buddha, that pleasure isn't coming from the theft. It's from some previous positive action. And that theft is going to lead to some suffering in the future. And if it was instant, we'd get it a lot faster. It would be really obvious what was in our best interest to do or not do. But it isn't like that. So we have to actually turn to our inner wisdom to see how negative actions can never serve us well. Even if in the moment, perhaps you don't get caught by the police and you never go to jail and you have, lots of money, that there's no way that does not impact you in a negative way because of the harm you do to others, because it's not like nobody's money. You steal money from a bank, they're people that you're stealing from. It's not just an entity. So, so you're doing harm to all those people, as well as to yourself by relying on a negative action for your resources. According to the teachings, that's going to lead to being destitute in the future, partly because everybody will steal from you. So this is the method.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Is it okay?
Yeah, well, please interrupt me anytime.
I've heard more than 2 times similar teachings, and this is first time I actually realized. So, the law of cause and effect is one way. So, one cause will cause one effect, or one type. So, one type of a cause will cause
Yes,
one type.
exactly.
So there is the continuity, the direct connection, but in time, there is absolutely no connection.
Right.
So that is very confusing for us
For all of us.
laymen.
Yes.
So we actually have to accept that premise on faith. Right?
Yeah, I think so. And this is the area that's the hardest. I think that karma is considered an incredibly hidden object, meaning that only Buddhas can see all the karmic cause and effect and actually happening, because Buddhas have no ignorance, so they know all the facts, so they can put all the pieces together. However, when you develop karma binding, okay, which is one of the first things we're supposed to work on, you know, you develop clairvoyance, and you're able to remember some of your own past lives. And so some of these pieces start to fall into place. You know? So it's only a Buddha that can know all the pieces, because we're all interconnected. It's like everybody in this room is experiencing some shared karma as well as your individual karma. So it's not divorced from each other. We're all connected. We're all part of this web of activity. So being able to know all of the causes and conditions for anything to arise, because that's what karma is saying. It's that everything's a dependent arising, and so all the causes and conditions have to be there in order for something to arise. And when they're not there, they either don't arise, you know, or they cease. But it's this, but so when you know, so there's a point at which you can start to see this. What's recommended with karma is that you start by looking at physics. You start looking at how everything in the physical world is governed by cause and effect. Certain causes come together. You have to have apple seeds to get apple trees. It's not random. It's definitely, you have to have the right causes for the right effects. It is certain in that way. But just like in the world, you know, with physical things, you know, all the causes and conditions have to be there. So you may have an apple seed, but if you don't have water, soil, sun, you know, actual, what do we call it, fertile seed? I mean, if it's, you know, you're not going to get an apple tree no matter what, because not all the causes are there, or conditions are there. You have the substantial cause, which is the apple seed, but you don't have the other conditions. So the Buddha said, when you bring consciousness into it, it's not any different. You know, consciousness is also subject to the law of cause and effect. So our experience of happiness or unhappiness is a result of the same thing, causes and conditions coming together. Yeah.
But karma transcends different lives, right?
All of this does. So does physics. I mean, yeah.
Right, so we don't know whether that pleasure or this pain came from this life.
Oh, we can pretty much say it doesn't. You know, the teachings seem to imply that pretty much, no, it's from the past.
But so, how would that encourage us to do the right thing if, well, we might be doing the right thing, expecting a pleasurable result. But
Yeah, well, that's why the
karma from a previous life, which is
Right.
all negative.
Right.
So how do we reconcile that?
You can't reconcile that. So this is what I mean about you have to really look towards, you have to really investigate. So the teachings are not saying that you can prove this to yourself right away. You need to develop clairvoyance. You need to be able to remember your past lives to connect the pieces, okay? So that puts it off into the, you know, that's on the shelf to develop other realizations, to be able to really investigate karma. What I can do in the meantime is see what happens to me with my mind when I do things that are negative, and things when they're positive, you know, and see what, you know, how much, you know, how many negative things I do that I regret. It's much more obvious as we get older, because children, you know, I mean, it's like we learn, you know, that it doesn't feel good to steal from others. It doesn't feel good to cheat others. It doesn't feel good unless you develop the habit, you know, where you think that's the only way to have power. So you have to look at people. You know, you can't know what's going on for anybody else because you can't read their minds at this point. But we can glean something from what we see in our interactions with each other and with ourselves. So like for me, one of the big things that has helped me have confidence in the Buddhist teachings is that since I, started on this path, I sleep better at night because I'm a better person. I act better, I harm less, and I feel better about who I am. And so I've been suffering less already. And that's been a big factor for me, is just, that following this advice works. Now, is it going to impact my future lives? I don't know. I don't have any realizations yet. It just makes sense. It makes sense to me that if the physical universe is governed by this, by laws of cause and effect, our minds already interact with that. We decide whether we're going to plant those apple seeds. We decide whether or not we're going to build a car. We decide whether or not, all these things. We're already involved in the physical causes and effects. We're one of the conditions through our ideas. It's not just happening outside of us. We bring our minds to it. Animals bring their minds to it. They develop tools. They develop, all of these things impact the physical universe, which is subject to the law of cause and effect. So to me, it makes sense that it would be true also of our experience of things. That there isn't any, one of the main ideas in Buddhism is that there really isn't any, there isn't something that is from its own side good. So like I may love chocolate, but there's no ingredient called delicious in the chocolate. It just happens to be causes and conditions have come together that I like chocolate. Some people don't like chocolate. Those causes and conditions didn't come together for them in that way. So their experiences of pleasure, small experiences, are not in chocolate. But my experience of pleasure in chocolate, according to the Buddha, is due to past positive action. But it's not the chocolate. It's not, it's not like from the chocolate. If I didn't create the cause to have pleasure, nothing would give me pleasure. Because it's not in the object. Yes, Chris?
Sometimes the fact that I can't reconcile that is I come to a place where it's very really in the beginning with the absolute and the relative. Relatively, that's a cause. That red mark's an effect. Easy. But from the absolute perspective, it's not like that. Or else
Yeah.
it wouldn't be absolute. So that helps me a little bit with that non-reconciliation.
But this, I think this is one of those difficult points. So, and I know it was one of the last points I ever developed confidence in. It took a long time. It made perfect sense to me logically that it would extend to but having confidence in that, partly because I don't want it to be true. Which is really foolish. Because accepting it is true gives you all the power about your future. So it's really self-defeating to go, oh, it doesn't matter what I do. It's random, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we know it's not entirely random, don't we? There are all sorts of things. You can't get a college degree if you don't go to college, unless you cheat. We live in the world of cause and effect all the time. So, but there are times, it's like, I remember one time one of the senior nuns in the nuns community I lived in, I offered her dessert after lunch, and she goes, I don't think I want to exhaust my virtue on dessert today. And I just, it was just a different way of looking at it, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So, So it's just interesting. So it's fun to look into, and I think it's, you know, it's just like I said, you know, the more I really investigated what made actions negative, which means looking at the harm it does. I mean, that's really what negative actions are about, looking at the harm, you know. And so, and the less harm you do, the less regret you have. It's just, you know, so, and the Buddha would say that's evidence of our Buddha potential. The fact that we have the qualities that don't want to harm, you know, that's evidence that we have the potential to become a Buddha. And the more other-centered we become, the less self-interested, self-centered that we are, the less harm we'll do. It's just natural. The more we can see each other as not separate, but as all part of one giant community, the less we'll want to harm each other. Because they're, you know, we'll see them as part of the same, you know, we're all in it together kind of attitude. And we know globally, we can quite easily see that we're all in it together. So it benefits us the more we can find ways to cooperate, to help each other. So the method for developing refuge is to develop faith and good qualities in the three jewels. So you have to look at what the good qualities of the three jewels are. Then you have to want those good qualities for yourself. You know, that's what makes them good to you. I want that. You know. Then you joyously persevere. Well, that takes time. This is another thing that isn't immediate. You put in the effort to try to achieve those good qualities. And then you remove your doubt through the wisdom that you gain from having put the teachings into practice. And the result of that is the faith of conviction. And the faith of conviction relies on your reason, your inner wisdom. And so that's what they mean by refuge, is having the faith of conviction in the three jewels. You know, so it's all gradual, you know, like, you know, the first, when you do take refuge, it won't be the same, you know, as the refuge, if you continue to practice, that you take 10 years from now. It's only as strong as your mind is at the time, as your confidence is. And that's fun. That's how we progress. Lama Yeshe, who's the founder of the FPMT Centers, who passed away in 1984, I have discovered that the light of wisdom is the only vehicle to liberate myself from confusion, suffering, and ego conflict. So now, instead of my taking refuge in chocolate and ice cream, I will really inwardly trust, inwardly completely rely on the object of Buddha, Dharma wisdom, and profound Sangha. So this is the kind of mind that can benefit us in our practice, because it helps us stop the ego conflict. I don't want that to be true. You know, it can stop the fight that we have with ourselves about changing habits. So, you know, people ask me all the time, why is it so hard to develop good habits? You know, and it seems so easy to develop bad habits. Well, of course, that's not true. We all have lots and lots of good habits. You know, we just need to recognize that for some reason, we still have a belief that doing something that we enjoy, like eating chocolate. I really like to eat chocolate. Well, you know, I'm just headed for diabetes, you know. And that is not going to make me happy at all. You know? So it's this, you know, like, oh, well, maybe not today. It's that idea of things being, you know, if I don't have a problem with sugar today, I'll never have a problem with sugar. So this is that false belief in things are permanent. They don't change. You know, somebody asked me today, you asked me today if I had back problems, and I'm thinking, no, I don't have any back problems. I just got, you know, my bone density results, and now I have low density in my back. I'm like, well, I'm going to have back problems. It's coming. But so developing our knowledge about the good qualities, why we can trust in the three jewels, can help us. Yeah, I'll get there. Promise. So what is a Buddha? So it's a being whose mind is free of faults, and that all good qualities have been perfected. And it's irreversible. It's not. According to the Buddha's teachings, all of our negative states of mind are based on incorrect information. They're based on ignorance. And so when we correct that wrong information, then they simply won't arise anymore. Jeffrey Hopkins, who is Professor Emeritus. Yeah. Emeritus? Okay. Of the University of Virginia, you know, taught religious studies for decades and decades. And he was one of the first translators of Tibetan into English. So he translated a lot for His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the early years when he came to the West. When he first met His Holiness, he said that he asked him if he could be his student, because that's, you know, it's a two-way street. You know, the teachers don't just have students. You know, it has to be from both sides. These teachers have to take the responsibility of accepting someone as a student. So he told Dr. Hopkins, he said, well, come back to me when you've memorized the outline to the Lamrim Chenmo, which is one of the major texts. It's a 42-page outline. And he just told it right then and there. He already knew it. So that was a very auspicious beginning. So he's quite knowledgeable. In fact, he's one of the translators to English of that text. They had a group of like 11. So responding to sentient beings' needs throughout time and space, emanation bodies appear, perform their task without effort, and are withdrawn. So this is getting at some of the qualities of a Buddha. So the word Buddha means waking up. So often you'll hear it as the awakened one. In Tibetan, they translated it as Sangye. Sang means cleansed, purified. Ge means developed all good qualities. Trust in the Dharma naturally follows from faith in the Buddha. Once you recognize that the Buddha has attained the highest level of knowledge, compassion, power, and freedom from all forms of misery and its causes, then you can be sure that the method he teaches is also perfect. Geshe Sopa ordained me. He was a professor of religious studies at the University of Wisconsin for decades. Recently passed away. So, Dharma. What does Dharma mean? It means to hold in Sanskrit, just the word. Like, so phenomena is another word for Dharma. You know, Dharma can mean just phenomena, all phenomena, because it means it holds its identity. So, in this context, it means it holds you back from suffering. So through practicing the Dharma, you're practicing things that lead to happiness. In Tibetan, the word Dharma is translated as Chu, and again, it means many things, to hold all phenomena. Tibetan didn't just, for knowledge's sake, because it's a fun fact, didn't have a written language until the Dharma came to Tibet, and then they wanted to be able to write it down in their own language. So Shantideva, was an 8th century Indian master, wrote a book called The Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or The Bodhisattva Deeds, or Engaging in the Bodhisattva's Way. It's translated a lot of different ways. The Buddhas do not wash away evil with water. They do not remove the suffering of beings with their hands, nor can their knowledge be transferred to others. They liberate by teaching true Dharma. So this is a major point in the teachings about life. So there's nothing in the teachings saying that the Buddha can do the work for you. That, if you just do all the right things, the Buddha will bless you with enlightenment. It's not possible, according to the teachings. This is an inner transformation of our mind. So we're the only ones who can do that. All he can do is guide us through what he learned through his experience on how he became enlightened and ceased his own suffering. So when we pray in Buddhism, it's about, may your teachings transform my mind. May I internalize these teachings. So when we go for refuge, or when we make prostrations, when I walk in and make prostrations, I'm thinking of the good qualities of, of the Buddha, and it's this, the action of prostrating is this idea of showing humility and respect to someone who has more experience than you do, and who can show you the way, the way out of suffering. And not only that, but teach you the way out of suffering so that you can help others get out of suffering. Because clearly, if we figure out a way out of suffering, we wouldn't want to leave anybody behind. So it's not like, oh, well, that's good enough. This is one of the reasons why, as long as you're self-interested, you can't get there. Because it just isn't, that's a mistaken state of mind. This idea that selfishness will get you there is not going to happen. So, but they are available to help us through their teachings. And if we create the cause, we create the cause to meet teachers. And we create the cause to pull off that, I remember the first time I bought a Buddhist book in a bookstore, why did it pop out at me, So, somewhere I created the cause to be attracted to that book. And this is not just true of the good stuff. We're also attracted to, the yucky stuff, so it's all of that. We created the cause for that to happen. That's what cause and effect's about. The Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. In this context, we use the word Dharma with a capital D to indicate the actual teachings of the Buddha. It's considered the actual refuge, because it is through internalizing the teachings, making them your own personal instructions and putting them into practice, that we will actually be able to be liberated from suffering and become enlightened. So it's really the internalized Dharma that's the true refuge. This is that resultant refuge. And then there's the Sangha, the third jewel. So in Sanskrit, the word Sangha means a group or community. In this context, it's those who have joined together to realize the teachings. In Tibetan, they translate it as Gendun, which the GE part refers to Gewa, which it means you're turning your mind towards virtue. So just as a flash of lightning on a dark, cloudy night for an instant brightly illuminates all, likewise through the might of Buddha, occasionally a wholesome thought briefly appears in this world. So what this verse is getting at is that all of our positive actions are the result of our teachers. whether it's our parents, whether it's the Buddha, it's, you know, we didn't just come up with it on our own. You know, we have the basis, like we have, you know, we have naturally have compassion. But how we show that compassion or act from that compassion, we learn from others. And in fact, all of our good qualities are dependent on us learning from others. You know, whether they're teachers or just someone who needs us. And so we rise up to that occasion and we try to do what we can to be of help. So this, you know, this helps counter the mind of pride that thinks that I, independently, over here, by myself, have developed these good qualities. As opposed to the reality is, thanks to you, I've developed some good qualities. You know, that we don't do them in isolation. We do them because people ask things of us, and then we try to do that. So, so this is another way in which we're all in it together. This is not the optimist view. I'm kidding. Shantideva wrote these verses, so it says for this. Hence, virtue is perpetually feeble, and evil's strength is extremely intense. This was Shantideva's, this whole text, which is 10 chapters, is all about Shantideva's practice, how he put the instructions into practice, how he thinks, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And so he's looking at himself. He's going, you know, that I have these tiny little good qualities that happen as infrequently as a strike of lightning in the middle of the night, and that basically my virtue is perpetually feeble and my evil is intense. You know, so this was this, you know, kind of like, don't think you're there yet, Shantideva. You have more work to do. That he's the advice he's giving himself. So, because all we have to do, I mean, this is to encourage us, because we don't want to sit back and go, oh, I did one nice thing today, so it doesn't sort of matter about the rest. You know, is to kind of keep striving to do a little better, you know, so that someday we actually, you know, have no faults at all. Okay, where was I going? Oh, if we look around, I'm sorry? Yes, but you know, so this sounds terribly pessimistic, right? But actually, we can use our logic here. If you look at the world and you just look at your experiences in one day alone, you don't see evil constantly. You see people helping each other, you see people smiling, you see kindness, you see, you know, all kinds of things. You know, mostly what we see is people treating each other decently, you know. So that is our Buddha potential. So we want to develop confidence in that, you know, not just in ourselves, but in each other, you know, so that we're more cognizant that that's going on all the time. So we want to be very alert to our negative attitudes, our negative states of mind, in order to try to interrupt them, you know, and not act from those places. But one of the ways in which we can help ourselves do that is notice all of our good qualities. Every time we do something kind or patient or loving or generous, or, you know, and rejoice in that, you know. But it's not about developing our pride. It's about developing confidence in the inner good qualities, and also understanding that we like it. You know, when we act from those places, it feels pretty good. Geshe-Soka also sounds a little pessimistic. In the rare event that a Buddha teaches, it is uncommon to have the good fortune to encounter those teachings. It is rarer still to practice the instructions as they are taught. So the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, is the fourth super emanation of a Buddha, which means they can appear in a way that we can see them and receive teachings directly from a Buddha. It's the fourth in a series of 1,000 of this era. Maitreya will be 5. And that's just this era, because there's no beginning to time, there's, to consciousness, there's no end to consciousness, so, But so this idea of, this is one of the good qualities of a Buddha, is that they are not bound by the physics that we're bound by, because they're out of samsara. So their mind is, they can manifest anything, because their mind is no longer bound by restrictions. There's no ignorance, there's no, so there's just, as soon as there's the causes and conditions are there for a manifestation to help us, it's there. This is really a stretch to, yes.
And I learned that there are actually, for example, Tsongkhapa, the founder of the, he has become a Buddha. That there's actually many disciples.
Yeah. Yeah, they would.
Shakyamuni that actually became Buddha.
Yeah, they say that many of the disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha in that lifetime became liberated from samsara.
And you mentioned there was Shakyamuni was
Fourth
There
of a
was a
super
fifth.
emanation body.
Oh,
The
that's
super
different.
emanation body is the presence of an enlightened being in ordinary form to our appearance, but who's capable of showing the deeds of a Buddha. Like in right after Losar, the new year in the Asian calendar, the Buddha, they celebrate 15 days of miracles, and it's to celebrate the time in the Buddha's life that he displayed miracle abilities, because it was useful to show his students that way. But they could, every person in this room could be enlightened but me, but I can't see any of those miraculous things because I haven't created the cause. A super emanation body can do that, and they're rare. So that's what I mean by 4. But no, every mind that has become enlightened they don't cease, so they're still here. We just can't see them because we haven't created the cause. So they talk about pure lands and bodhisattvas being able to get teachings in pure lands, which means they've created the cause to actually see a form body of the Buddha and receive teachings directly. Something to look forward to. So all of these things are not necessary to have belief in the beginning. I mean, they might encourage some people, Some people really clearly from past lives have practiced. They're very energetically in tune, and they can really, like, they go to, if they go on pilgrimage to holy places, they can feel the energy of the enlightened beings. I'm not one of them. I haven't created the cause for that. So, but I mean, so we're all at different places in our understanding. So you can come at it from, people who were, I had a good friend who was, who said she had dreams about Buddhas her whole childhood, and until she went to college and took a course in Buddhism, she didn't know what they were, But so for her, it was easy to imagine we've had past lives and you've met the teachings before and all this, because she had an experience like that. So it's just, but those things, it's not like you're supposed to just believe those things because the Buddha said so. There's no need to do that. In some ways, when you first encounter these teachings about things like the good qualities of a Buddha, to me, it was this experience of circular logic. Like one of there are 4 reasons given for why a Buddha is a worthy refuge. First, he has mastered himself and attained the sublime state of fearlessness. If he had not attained this, he would not be able to protect others from all fears, just as a person who has already fallen down cannot help up someone else who has also fallen down. Do we see a problem here? We don't have the merit of living in the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, so we can't see this in action, So because I was fortunate enough to go off to a nuns community and study rather intensively for 5 years or 7 years, as I learn more about the, sort of the overview of the entire path to enlightenment, I started to be able to go backwards from the end. Like you look at, okay, let's pretend a Buddha can exist. What qualities would they have to have? So all the teachings make sense to me from that point of view. If I look at, yes, he would have to be in a sublime state of fearlessness. That's what I want, is a sublime state of fearlessness. So if I'm going to do all this work, that's one of the outcomes I want. But also, for a Buddha to be actually an object of refuge and be able to lead us to that state, he'd have to be there. So that makes sense to me. So as I learn more and more about the path, I have confidence that the path makes sense, that all these things would be necessary. I don't have realizations of being able to do it, because I'm just an ordinary sentient being. I have confidence in the teachings I'm able to put into practice, but I don't have karma body. I don't have clairvoyance. So, but I have a lot more confidence now that if I keep going at whatever pace I go, as long as I keep going in the right direction, I will get there and find out. But so I look at it that way. I look at it if it makes some sense, that these would be the qualities of an enlightened being. I don't know if that helps or. But then you also, when you see people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Jackie's stories about Lama Yeshe, and we all probably know of examples of people in the world that have really impressed us with their qualities. It's quite clear that you can develop good qualities to a much greater degree than what we may have now. We can see it. So that gives me a lot more confidence in effort. Second, the Buddha is in all ways skilled in the means of training disciples. In other words, his teachings are effective, and he was an effective teacher. If he were not so, he would not be able to fulfill your needs, even if you went to him for refuge. So, if the teachings don't work, they are not a source of refuge. Third, he has great compassion. If he did not have it, he would not protect you, even if you went to him for refuge, because he wouldn't care about you. Fourth, he is pleased not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice. If he were not, he would not act as a refuge for everyone, but would help only those who had previously helped him. In brief, only one who is free of all fears, who is skilled in the means of freeing others from fear, who has great impartial compassion for everyone, and who acts for everyone's welfare, regardless of whether or not they have benefited him, is worthy of being a refuge. So what do you think?
Sounds great.
So when you read the stories, I think one of the books recommended for this class, which, is like an 800-page book, so good luck with that. The Path of, well, I don't know, what is it? It's still
Old
called Old
Path,
Path, White
White
Clouds.
Clouds, yeah.
It's Thich Nhat Hanh's
Got that.
book on the stories of the Buddha before he was a Buddha, kind of thing. And those are very inspiring, because those are the kinds of stories, like the story that hooked me was the story about the Buddha had gone to the hell realm, so Buddha screwed up, he's in the hell realm, he's not a Buddha yet, and actually that's probably not true, he probably prayed to be born in the hell realms to help others. So there he is in the hell realms, doing these hell realmy type things, right? And he sees someone struggling with whatever hell realm activity this other person had, and offered to help him. And I just could think, I want to be like that. I am so not like that. It's sort of like, please come help me. I can imagine saying that, but it's just this idea of someone who really with that lightness, ease of spirit, just jumps in to be of help. I just really appreciate that quality. So, that really just sort of hooked me. It's sort of like, okay, if I can just act, to me, these are all of our good qualities, and people who show the ability to transcend my level of good qualities. We know how much better the world would be if we all acted that way. We all came from that kind of place. So it's easy for me to aspire towards that. That's the wish. It's easy for me to think I want to get there. Not so easy to want to put in the effort to get there. That's harder. But eventually, the more we practice, the more we put in the effort, it will become easy. So this is why the teachings on bodhicitta are stressed. Bodhicitta is the mind. It's a 24/7 mind that wishes to become enlightened to benefit others. When you've accomplished that, there's no struggle anymore. Your self-interest just doesn't come up. And if we really look at our minds, we see that it's the self-centered attitude that gets in our way the most. It's what makes us not like this thing or that thing, or gee, when is this meeting going to be over? It's that, that when we're just thinking about, am I having fun yet? That is what keeps us from happiness. Because as soon as we have that self-interest, we suffer. According to the Buddha, our existence and cyclic existence is cycle of birth, death, from uncontrolled negative states of mind, or controlled by negative states of mind. Is of the nature of suffering. So it's always going to be dissatisfying. It's not, because it's not perfect, doesn't come anywhere close to perfect. So there's always, so if we have a self-interested approach, we're going to be disappointed constantly. Whereas if we quit focusing on that and just focus on, others, that just kind of falls to the background. That makes sense? I'm so tired of talking. Questions? Debate? Arguments?
Chocolate?
Chocolate. Chocolate sounds good. So I guess studying refuge, one of the important aspects that you can choose to experience is really just thinking about, you know, what does it mean for you? What would a safe haven mean? For me, I always, you know, for me, the idea is I would like to be able to, what I imagine, because I have no experience with this, you know, like a soldier who's really well prepared, you know, so he's in some, you know, strange place, you know, but has confidence, you know, that they can handle whatever comes up. So there's not any fear, it's just readiness and alertness, you know, and just able to handle whatever is coming up. That's to me what peace would be. Of just, you know, having it, you know, not feeling worried, not feeling inadequate, not feeling, you know, "Ugh, I don't know what to do," kind of thing. But just sort of this confidence that, you know, I don't know what's going to unfold, but I can handle it, and I can handle it in a way that I'll still respect myself tomorrow, you know, and still feel, you know, and feel that I was of use, you know, but not with expectations of how that's going to look, just this kind of, and so to me, this idea of developing our inner wisdom, confidence in our inner qualities, you know, cultivating you know, the Buddha's teachings don't say you need to develop qualities you don't have. It just says you need to, you know, expand them. You need to grow your good qualities. We all have exactly what we need in order to become enlightened. So it's not about having to develop new habits. Like we all have the habit of concentration. We all agree? What are the things that you can concentrate on?
Driving, reading.
Oh, I'm glad. This is a good thing to be able to concentrate on.
Concentrate on bringing happiness to other people.
And I know Arlene thinks that way. So yes. So, you know, for me, it's like, you know, if I'm on the last chapter of a murder mystery, you know, I won't hear anything. You know, I won't hear the phone ring. That's not true. I'm exaggerating. But, you know, we all have things that we can be in the grips of, you know, and totally focused, you know. And, you know, we know teenagers can do it. You know, we were all teenagers. So, I mean, this is the thing. So we have that ability. We can concentrate, you know. Can we learn? I don't know about you, but I'm full of information from many things I've tried to learn, so we know we can learn. We already have some wisdom. It's not like we're, you know, starting from scratch. You know? So, I mean, this is where, you know, like, oftentimes when we're about to do something or say something and we think, no, I shouldn't say that. It just wouldn't be nice, or it would just make things worse, or whatever. I mean, so we have some inner wisdom. I mean, we just, you know, so it's not like we're starting from scratch. This is good news. So, but we also have a lot of habits that turn out to not be effective. They won't actually help us be happier or more at peace or any of those things, you know, that we have cultivated through life after life, you know, and they're hard to let go of, partly because we're kind of out of control due to them. They were so familiar with them that we put them into motion without thinking, you know. Just like the way we can now get in a car without thinking, but I'm very glad you don't do that and you think. But you know, if you're like me and you've driven home and gone, gee, how'd I get here? You know, so I'm exaggerating. But I've done that. And I've done it more than once. So, we just need to start looking at what's going on in our minds and then start to investigate, is this really working? what is it even telling me? If I react with anger at criticism, what does this say about what I believe? If I always think that when things go wrong, it's my fault, or when things go wrong, it's your fault, or when things go wrong, whatever. If we don't start looking in our minds and seeing, is my attitude impacting my happiness or not? Then we can't discover the habits we need to change. So we just need to keep checking. Okay, if I wasn't thinking like this, how would this unfold? It's just like, we've talked about with family holidays and stuff. If you go home with the idea that, oh, this is going to be just like last year, it's going to be terrible, and so and so and so and so is going to fight, and such and such and such and such is going to, no matter what happens, that's how you're going to perceive it, because you've made up your mind. So we need to look at those things to be able to start to use our own reasoning to decide, maybe if I try something new, it will be worth my while. So, and the Buddha has lots of suggestions for that. The Dharma has suggestions. So one of the good qualities of a Buddha is they say a Buddha, once you're enlightened, you no longer have to think about things. You experience everything directly. Your mind pervades everything. It's everywhere. You don't have to think about. It just knows. So everything that a Buddha mind does is effortless. It just spontaneously arises. So what, from those perfected good qualities. Their example of that is like a still lake does not have to think about, now I'll reflect the full moon above. It merely reflects the moon above. The mind is our faculty to know. So a Buddha mind no longer has to think about things to know. It experiences everything directly. So it's like, it's like reflecting all the knowledge that there is about everybody and everything. They say a Buddha's speech is such that if every being in the universe were to ask Buddha a different question, he could comprehend them all with one instant of his wisdom and answer them all with a single utterance, which all beings would understand in their own language and at their own level of understanding. Have you ever been to a teaching? Like, I hear this all the time if you go to His Holiness's teachings or Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings. People come out and they say, man, he was just talking straight to me, and everybody feels that way. It's like, okay. So, but this is that experience, this idea that it is, that kind of wisdom will serve everyone in their different ways, in the needs of those students. So it's kind of cool. A Buddha is a dependent arising. A Buddha starts where we are, So it's through their effort that they accomplish, they attain this state. So the Buddha observed through his practice of meditation, and he developed the abilities, what are called CDs, of things like clairvoyance, being able to see other people's beings' minds, being able to see cause and effect, and then was able to see the paths that would lead out of suffering, and what got in the way of that. It's like this idea that our self-interest can prevent us from seeing solutions. If if we're already invested in a particular solution, you know, where we can't see what else is possible because we're obscured. So enough of this. Wait, my words. So who freaked out about the thought of homework?
Know that.
It's a choice. So if you gave, if there's a list of people's email addresses, if your email address appears on the list, I will send you the readings for this class. So there's a selection from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there's a couple from Lama Yeshe, and from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and there's a whole list for you. So, you know, people who are interested in, you know, actually being certified that they took this class, passed the test of this class, came to all the classes, and blah, 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 you have to do all the readings. So, so it's a to-do list, not just a suggested list. But it can really be helpful if you read them before you come to class, because then that probably will generate some questions, you know. So, you know, and bring them on, because, you know, this is how we get there. This is how we investigate.
Is
Yes,
there a
Melissa?
book or some physical readings?
Well, there's also, there's one of the readings is from The Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, which is that great big thick book, which I don't recommend for beginners, because it's a teaching, it's a transcript of a 30-day teaching that Pavanka Rinpoche gave to a group of monks. So they're not starting where you are. You know, they couldn't become monks if they hadn't gone for refuge already, for example. So it's refuge, taking refuge, going for refuge is required when you take any of the vows in Buddhism. So, you know, so that's part of the teaching behind, it's a gateway to the teachings. So, but I'm sending the readings, so if you want to print them out, print them out. But we don't print them out. I've learned, finally, going to Australia and living without my books, it's taught me how to read online. So I can now do that. So I'm sure whatever. So I'll send that. I'm glad you had asked this question. So I'll also send a couple of I'll send one meditation with the readings tonight, and just about exploring refuge. Sometimes you'll get these meditations, and they're guided, it's this long thing. You're like, they're telling me that I should only have to meditate 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the morning since I'm a beginner, and they give me this thing I couldn't do in 10 minutes to save my life, So that's a very good question. So you read them, just make them part of your reading. And then if there's part of it that resonates with you, or you want to explore further, you meditate on that for 5 minutes. It's not, you don't have to do the whole meditation, and you can do a paragraph a day if it's a long one, So it's just guided or analytical meditations are about contemplation, where you're thinking about it, investigating it, questioning it. So that's the first stage. Concentration meditation, on the other hand, where you try to, say, keep your focus on your breath for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, is a different kind of meditation. We need both skills. So, but the meditations I send you are not that. They are on the subject matter. So, and sometimes they're called review meditations, because they'll just be a review of a list of the good qualities of a Buddha or something. That doesn't appear in this course, but anyway. So I'll send you that. So I encourage you to read that. Whatever. Those of you who've taken refuge, do refuge. You do what you already do for refuge. But this is just an opportunity to understand what it means to have the blessings of the teacher or the Buddha, of the Dharma, of the group of companions that you practice with. As a support. So they often say, it's like the Buddha is a physician and he can diagnose your illness, and the Sangha are like the nurses, and the Dharma's like the medicine. But if you don't take the medicine, it won't matter how good of a doctor it is, how good the, nurses are, because it's up to you. So, so I can't say anything more about that.
And if anyone's interested in the key for Refuge.
Right. So FBMT, which is our parent organization, also has these courses online. And Thupten Dundrup, I think, is the monk that teaches the online course. He's got a lovely, peaceful art manner. It's very nice. So if you, for an extra, I feel like those commercials. And that's not all. For an extra $20, you can get the key to that. And so you get the transcripts of all the teachings, also all the audio of the teachings, so you can listen to them if you're better that way of listening. You can do that. I think there are meditations, that are led that way, and more materials. I don't know. It might be exactly the same materials, but except you get double the teachings. So that might be well worth your while. Just depends on how much time you have. So, go with that. Anything else, my dear? Nope. Okay.
Is that $20 per module or?
No, per module, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not per class,
Right.
just per module, yeah. Which is a little cheaper than the way they sell it. They give us permission to not charge as much. So, out of their kindness. But you get the whole program, it's all online. And you can download it all, too. You don't have to do it online. You can download it all. So that's another option. Any last thoughts, questions? Yes?
The first noble truth, everyone suffers. That's where I go when I try to find refuge. Someone pisses me off, I have to think, well, everyone will suffer too.
Right. See, and that's exactly the way, if we just, this is why becoming familiar with the teaching is so helpful. So if we have something in our mind like, the truth is suffering, then exactly like you said, when something happens, we can think, everyone's suffering. I don't have to take this personally. It's just, this is just proof they're suffering today. So it's really helpful. But that is the way we can go for refuge in the teachings. Yes?
Something that's personally helped me, that you kind of hit the nail on the head, was you talked about kind of like this awareness technique, like questioning your feelings. Like when you're angry, just like question it. And like that's something I've been practicing for a while, and it's like when you do introduce that area of skepticism and doubt to what you're feeling, good or bad, it kind of mitigates the anger. And like it's kind of like how you practice the concentration of breath when you first meditate. It's like you'll get angry, and then you'll realize, and then the next time you realize, you'll realize after maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes,
Yeah.
and then 15 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then soon you realize that like.
And don't feel bad if it's 2 days.
Yeah, right. It's like the tendencies for anger to arise, kind of like not dissolve, but just you'll be able to like nip it in the bud. So,
Because you become more and more aware. You'll start to notice the more awareness you bring. So, I mean, one of the most effective ways to practice is to just notice as much as you can all day long what's going on in my mind. Whatever's going on. to just check in with yourself, what's going on in my mind, you know, because what happens then is that you become so familiar with all the clues of, you know, when impatience is arising, or anger is arising, or craving is arising. You know, you'll start to really be able to sense just the most subtle clues for that. And that's what gives you that power to choose. You'll be, you know, because you're not out of control yet, you know. And so that's, you know, so it just gets, you notice it sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner, you know. And then you, obviously, it's a process of how we choose to respond as well. Because sometimes we just don't, you know, I refuse not to be impatient. This is why Shanti Davis says we run after suffering. So we just, you know, we just have to have a sense of humor and keep noticing and recognize it's actually a choice. And that takes a while, but it's not an easy choice. Habit energy is very forceful, you know, so when we're trying to push back, it takes a lot of repetitive effort. So, but it can be done. Okay.
Can I just
Yes, please.
add to this? One of my first practices when I learned and joined Buddhism was practice to lower or get rid of anger, because that was really the reason why I started looking and practicing Buddhism. And it caused lots of trouble in my life for dearest people in my life, my own anger. And so I started exactly like you say, first noticing, and then like noticing after the anger destroyed everything that I was building. And then this, you know, noticing a little earlier and so on. And it completely changed my life, that practice. It really works. It took me 5 years though. But I reached a stage where I can recognize, I still cannot catch it before it comes, but I can recognize it within a couple of minutes. And I still, after those minutes, have power to just stop. It really works. It's wonderful.
So does everybody have a daily practice at the moment of meditation? No. This is not a test. But, you know, you can look towards those who do and ask them, what have they noticed by doing it? Because I really do think this is one of those perfect examples that you have to do it to find out. You just have to do it, and you have to get up and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And then finally you realize, oh, you know, there's something to this. Oh, but you can't find proof in advance. I find that so annoying. You really can't. So it's about doing. So this, you know, so one of the ways in which you can bring refuge into it, not that you're definitely taking refuge or something, but just thinking about it, is reflecting on something like meditation, you know, and how that's become a source of refuge, and what does that mean to you, and, you know, what could that mean about the other teachings, and, you know, et cetera, you know, because this is how we build our confidence in the instructions. So, any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I like your idea about getting the audio books, or because that might help me. Because like right now, I just don't feel I have the attention span to sit and read all your readings, and you know, I'd rather have something audio maybe help me, you know, calm down and start to meditate a little more. So I'm going to try that.
So definitely the audio, having, you know, if it doesn't come naturally to you, which is true for most people, although I know people who just like clearly had practice in previous lives and, you know, they just took to it like that. I wasn't one of them. I'm like, I don't think I've ever been a Buddhist before, anything. It's like every single thing's like, are you kidding me? You know, I've had to, I mean, meditation was just like, what? So, you know, but, you know, hey, but so finding what works, you know, like listening to an audio, you know, and then eventually you will not need that. And in fact, you do not want to always rely on that because you will never internalize the meaning if you keep, it's like songs. You know, you may memorize, you could sing along with every song and then, but you have no clue what it says. You know, it's just, you know, and so when people say, have you ever listened to the words of that song that you're singing? You're kind of like, what? You know, we don't want that to happen with, you know, these teachings. We really want to hear what's being said. And we won't hear every word, and we won't, you know, there's no way. So you just have to, you know, just keep it up. You know? And then then it's available for you in those moments when you really need it. You know, the words will, you know, like the flash of lightning in the sky. So, all right. So thank you very much for your patience and your time.
Thank you.
And rejoice. So rejoice that you took time out of your busy lives to try to look at the Buddhist teachings in some way. That's really a positive action to take, and not one that most people are taking. So it's, you know, yay. So we can feel good about that. Okay?
Thank you.
And the list is going around. If anyone hasn't signed it, where is it now? Okay, probably on the second or third page. Please make sure you print clearly